So good evening, everybody. How are we all doing? So tonight I kind of wanted to talk about something that I kind of thought about today. I was talking with the wife today about why is every country pushing for immigration, one manner or another? Okay, maybe other than America. And I'm not trying to get into the politics of immigration. This is something on the other side of things. And I will get to the reason for the title of the stream of being the prophet of profit or controlling your options, because it actually has everything to do with it. And I honestly think advertising and companies really want a global marketplace, because you hit market saturation, which is when there's no more buyers of your products. That's market saturation. There's only so many people that are going to buy comic books. There's only so many people that are going to watch a certain kind of movie or eat a certain kind of food. Well, if you want a global marketplace and have a representative in each of the marketplaces, it's better to bring people that will buy your product to markets that you can't bust into. I hope that makes sense. Like if you're having a hard time selling Coke in Africa, what do? Well, you can try advertising Coke very heavily, but that's always been a hit or miss. But if you export a whole lot of Americans from, say, Atlanta, Georgia area who have drank a whole lot of Coke their whole life and are going to want a lot of Coke, you export them to South Africa, wherever, and they'll buy your Coke because now it's sitting on the market and it's cheap because it's been there forever. And then you can slowly increase the price. What this also does is that this will take the natives in the area. Oh, is that stuff any good? We've seen it, but we don't know anything about it. Well, yeah, here, try one. And it's a lot easier to get somebody to try something that somebody else is already using than to get somebody to try something that nobody's using. I hope that makes sense. Because it makes sense in my head. Now, I have no proof for this, but I think that's largely why we're pushing for basically every country to become more international, is so that we can further mix and match and basically homogenize cultures. So it's a lot easier to predict what to put into stores. Like forever, Walmart's been using an algorithm to stock their stores. You don't order anything if you're a stock person. You're just told what's coming in on the truck, and you have to unload it. You have to stock the shelves. But you don't really these people really want, Duracell batteries instead of Energizer. Well, no, the algorithm will make that. Okay. Well, how long before that algorithm becomes the control? Well, I've only ever got Duracell because that's all that's ever on the counter, and I need my batteries. Yes, I know that's probably a pretty dated reference, but I think you understand that you can only buy what's there, especially if you need something, and so when you're talking about controlling a market and controlling these things, it's best to have as many representatives of that market within a given area at any given time. That's the ultimate. And I think really that's what's driving it, because we're losing everywhere. Everywhere is losing the idea of a national identity. And I'm not talking what people sit there and drive up, it's like, oh, what's American? What's this? There's a national identity and then there's nationalism, and there's a difference. National identity evolves over time. It becomes what the country is over time, with enough information, with enough time and melding of different cultures and stuff, you get a unique culture out of it. That's great. That's actually a very good thing. But when you start slapping things together and calling it a culture, i.e., America in the 70s, 80s, 90s, basically controlling what you can buy. And I think a lot of people don't understand how limited your options were back then. You know, everybody looked the same. Everybody bought the same clothing because you really didn't have much of a choice. There wasn't a whole lot of choice. And I think that's why a lot of people are kicking and screaming like, oh, we all look the same now. It's like, yeah, we have always done that. I mean, you could tell people's economic status just by the clothing they wore because it's what they could afford. You know, if you had the brand new Jordache jeans in the 80s, you had a decent amount of money. I mean, not, you know, high-end money, but you had a decent amount of money. If you were wearing Levi's, Lee's, yeah, you didn't really have a whole lot of money. You know, that's just what everybody wore. And, you know, you got to understand that we're now getting to the point where we can buy pretty much anything we want from any market. Exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Whatever building of cultural identity, it's being swallowed by this late stage capitalism. Because we're not having a choice anymore. We're being controlled. These algorithms are controlling what we see, what even gets advertised to us. And I mean, most people are just ignoring advertisements anyway. Like, oh, commercials coming on, you know, ignore it, you know, or skip it if YouTube lets you. We are so inundated with ads that most people don't even pay attention to them anymore. How would you remember that the 90s and late 2000? Well, okay, the 90s, yeah, you wouldn't know. But the late 2000s, yeah. I mean, yeah, there was a pretty clear pop culture direction. There was a pretty clear identity. And a lot of people, I think, don't realize that this is tied in to so much else. You know, it's the way the government works. It's the way politics runs, is where people are going. And what we're seeing right now is the kickback. You know, for the longest time, we had this identity of, you know, trying to make everything equal. Well, now what's happening is that everything's got to be special and unique and this and that. And it's like, why don't we just work on being equal and treating everyone equal rather than dealing with all of these special interest groups, whether that's in pop culture, whether that's in, you know, because everything's political. You can't talk about comics without talking about the political sphere. You can't go to a movie without talking about the political sphere. You know, it's really hard for people to turn their brain off. Because we always have to be on guard. We live through culture of fear. We live through this cultural lens of I'm going to lose my identity, not realizing that enjoying a cultural zeitgeist of wherever you are is probably the most important thing. I mean, you don't go tour across Europe and your specific goal is to try every McDonald's in each country to see if it's any good if you're from America. Like, you want to try the local food, not how your local food is treated in other countries. Like, that seems, I don't know, to me ridiculous to even think about. I don't know if that makes sense to you guys, because it sure as hell makes sense to me. I've seen so many things over my years of different issues running back and forth between all of this stuff. And it bothers me because most people want the same thing. I don't care who you are. Most people want the same thing, which is just the time and freedom to be who and what they are. That's really it. Why not? Isn't that what everybody wants? At least that's all I see. I think there's more to the world than keeping up with everyone else. Not just, oh, I'm this identity, I'm that identity. Why not just figure out who you are and make that your identity? Why not? But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that the predictive algorithms pushing us to more of a narrowing of choice really bothers me. It's bothered me for years. I watched a documentary probably 15 years ago, somewhere in early 2010, when they were talking about data mining receipts, what companies bought and sold. And they talk about how they'll sell more hot cereals if the morning's going to be at a certain temperature. Like I think it was around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. They'll sell hot cereal more. So they just stopped stocking anything else. Well, now even for those few people that wanted something different, they can't get it. So now you engineered this idea that nobody's going to eat in like cold food on a cold morning. You're literally changing how people view and do things by controlling what you stock, by not being willing to take a risk. And I think that's the bigger issue I have, is that companies have minimized risk so much that innovation's out the window. You cannot innovate in today's day and age. I mean, take a look at this new Tron movie, Tron Ares. They're basically trying to do Tron Legacy all over again, only this time even less of the original storyline. So I absolutely love the original Tron movie. I grew up, and like every year for my birthday for many years, I would rent that movie and I would watch it on my birthday. At least once a year, because I absolutely love the original. And I think a lot of people don't understand why I'm not as big a fan of Legacy. Well, because when watching Legacy, when they were in the computer world, it didn't feel like the computer world. It felt too much like our world. Where in the original, when they were in the computer world, everything was referencing computers in some way or another. Everything even looked like computer parts. Various different pieces. Like it was identifiable that you were in the computer. Tron Legacy, it looked like you were in a dystopian cyberpunk world. It didn't feel like you were in a computer. They stripped all of that concept away from it. That you didn't feel like you were inside the computer anymore. You were just in a different world. And I think a lot of people understand that takes risk. Like the original Tron never made a big splash in the box office. It took forever for it to make its money back. But there was this groundswell of people that constantly, like me, would rent the movie or watch it when it was on the Disney Channel when you had to pay for it. And now we have to pay for it again. But, when people would watch it, because there was a level of authenticity to it. And I think a lot of what we're missing in today's world is authenticity. You're not buying it because you want it. You're buying it because it's what's there. You're not going to the movies to watch that particular movie. You're going to the movies because, well, you want to go to the movies. And so you just pick a random movie. And sometimes, hey, that's great. Good job. You found a great movie you didn't realize existed. But most of the time, it's like, it was a movie. It was like when the wife and I went and watched the new Naked Gun. It was a fine movie. Do I think it was worth the price for going to the movies? No. No, I don't think it was really worth the price. I'm not saying it was a bad movie. I'm, solid 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10, because it was in the same vein as the original Lethal Weapons. Too bad Liam Neeson couldn't pull off a Leslie Nielsen. He just doesn't quite have the charisma for it. He's not as willing to make himself look like the fool. He takes himself too seriously, even though he knows it's a not so serious. I'm not trying to critique Liam Neeson's acting. I am not an actor. I'm sorry, but I know what I like. And I'm not saying he did a bad job. He lacked the spontaneous goofballness that Liam Neeson can do. And the authenticity. And I think that's not a Liam Neeson problem. That's a director's problem. That's the industry's problem. Because again, we're not willing to take risks. People go to a Liam Neeson movie to see Liam Neeson. We forget that Leslie Nielsen, prior to doing some comedies, was actually a serious actor. And it wasn't until Airplane, where he was parodying a role. I don't think it was a role he did in a movie, but it was a similar actor to him, where it was funny to have him parodying a serious plane crash movie role that he was in the same, typecasting as the other actor, only to play it goofy. And if you've never seen Airplane, go and watch it. Right. Okay. Yeah, that's actually a good way. That is a very good way to see that. Is that he just wasn't selling it, selling it with his eyes. And Leslie Nielsen would tell you that it was a joke with his eyes, but his face and every other part of his body tells you that he's taking it seriously, and it's the perfect juxtaposition. I think Liam Neeson could do it. If you ever watched A Million Ways to Die in the West, he did more of a parody role there than he did in Naked Gun. I didn't expect a whole lot out of that movie either, but it was worth watching. I liked it. It was funny. But again, I think this is part of the problem is that taking risk. We have minimized our risk so much in everything that we're afraid to take a stand where we think it's important to take a stand. So we'll risk for something that seems safer, easier to take a risk on, where in other places you can't. And I think that's a terrible thing. I think it's something that people don't understand about how difficult it is to break out of that habit, because I think a lot of companies are stuck in that habit. They're absolutely terrified because this habit is so ingrained that they can't take a risk. I mean, look at all the failures that Disney's heaped on each other. And now they're, looking at another one with Tron Ares. I don't know how much they're spending on this movie, but I would not expect their opening weekend to be more than 30 million. And it's a Disney movie, so I'm guessing that their budget was more like 400 or 500. But I could be wrong. I mean, it's a Tron movie, so I mean, it could be all over the place on its budget. It could only be 100 million. But I'm not expecting it to go big. And I think it's mostly because they've lost the idea. We can't make a movie like the original Tron again. It's too risky. Even though I think the culture would like it more now than ever before. And I mean, there's plenty of ways to tell that story. And the other problem is that we don't have a sense of wonder like we did. We don't have that sense of carefree wonder and just the want to make a lot of fun, to enjoy ourselves, to go to the mall and hang, to do all of these things we used to do. It's not as much fun anymore. Because, all these companies want these massive amounts of money for what they do. Profits that are a record high, counting for inflation, wages that are a record low. Companies are squeezing profit out of everything and not realizing that, at some point you do have to give it back, or else you're just gonna lose. Because if people can't buy what you're producing, it doesn't matter how good the movie is if people can't go to the movie. It doesn't matter how good the car is if people can't afford it. It doesn't matter if you're going to squeeze your people dry. Oh, you're just, a try hard. You just need to try harder. Oh, yeah. You know what? The gig economy, which, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. The gig economy is a joke. You do more work and get less out of it than if you were paid to do the job. And the companies take even less risk because you're you're a contractor. You're not even an employee. So they don't have to provide you a jack or squat. And I think that's ridiculous. I think people allowing themselves to be caught in that trap is even worse. Don't get me wrong. If you're just somebody making ends meet and you need a little bit of scratch, sure. But if you feel like driving for somebody, DoorDash or something like that, just go get a job at a pizza place and deliver pizzas. You get paid by the hour plus. Otherwise, what's the point? What's the point in gig work? You sit in your car all day waiting for a run. And sure, some days are great. You can make $200-300. And then other days, you absolutely nothing. You average out those hours, you might be making minimum wage. Might. And that's including your tips. Oh, wait, that's all you get paid in. Other than your runs, I guess. I could be wrong, though. I don't know. It's hard to explain where I see the world going if we don't pay attention to it. We see a lot of disruption. We see a lot of things that we don't like. I think we forget that most of the people that we don't like right now, that we see, in 10 years, it'll be a miracle they're still around. And we need to pay attention to who's behind them. Who's coming up behind. And look at the ones that we like what they're doing before they're on a world stage. Because whether it's a musician, a movie star, a politician, an artist, if we pay attention to what they're doing now and support when they don't realize anybody's watching and see what they're doing when nobody's watching, that's more important than anything else in the world. See the people that are doing it with a passion of doing the right thing or doing what they want to do, not necessarily the right thing, but doing what they want to do. Sure, they might have hopes of being a big star in whatever realm they're in at some point. But right now, they're just trying to get their foot in the door. And I think you need to pay attention on how that person's getting their foot in the door. It's just like any new employee. How are they acting? Anybody that you work with and how, brand new employee. How are they acting? You'll know who you need to watch out for. who's going to try and throw you under the bus if they make a mistake, and who you're willing to work with. It's the same like that with everywhere. We also need to pay attention to what we really want, not so much as listening to advertisements, or what everybody else is doing. Sure, that might mean risking a little bit, trying something new. Nothing wrong with that. Try something new. Enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, don't buy it again. Simple as that. It's just like I realized, there were certain, like, I know I brought it up before, but Mickey 17. Yeah, I won't go watch that one, watch movies from those people again. I mean, it literally absolutely turned me off of watching Mark Ruffalo. That movie cemented my distaste for that actor. I don't know how to explain that to you. But yeah, I was not happy. And it wasn't because he parodied Trump. It was just, it showed me more of the way of how somebody will go too far. Yeah, exactly. Well, of course, an app like that, if it does exist, you'll never know where it is, or it'll be play hell to try and get to it. Or if it doesn't exist, you'll never be able to develop it because nobody's going to let you get it. You have to pay attention to, the news feed from the Congress and see where people vote. I mean, we can find it out. It's all public domain. It shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be hard to get it. Because it doesn't matter what the politicians tell you. And if that app exists, go get it. Go use it. Pure and simple. If you care about politics, that sounds like the best thing for you. Because then you can at least vote for people that vote the way you want. At least you can get representation for what your vote. You make your vote count in whatever way you can. Not that we actually have a democracy. We have a representative republic. And people forget that. Everybody uses democracy and we don't have a democracy. We don't really have control over what happens. It's just a scorecard for politicians on what popular vote they got. We have representatives that deal with what we want. And I think a lot more people need to really understand that that's the case. That we don't control. I mean, literally, I don't know how many elections in a row it was up until I think Trump upset it, but whoever spent the most money won the election. And the price keeps going up and up and up. Well, right. Well, it does. I mean, it died probably with Obama. Because that was hands down the most expensive political race up to that point. I think it was more expensive than the last two put together, but don't quote me on that. I know it was damned expensive. And it won Obama's race. And that's fine. I mean, a politician is a politician. They're all not good. I mean, really. I mean, I survived 2 Bushes. You really think it's bad now? I mean, yeah. Bush and Bush the sequel were not good. I mean, hell, Clinton wasn't good. Obama wasn't good. I don't know where we went so wrong in politics. And I know I don't particularly like talking politics, but I mean, damn it, I'm going to talk it. The fact is that neither party is any worth right now. What we need is a third party. We need a third party that we can count on. Or we need politicians that we can count on. We need something like that. Because both the Democrats and the Republicans are useless. They just keep trading back and forth, but it's the same regime both times. I don't care who puts in power. They just have different optics while they do it. I mean, Biden pushed for censorship only quietly because that was Biden's way. Biden didn't talk out loud. You know, he didn't, work in the open. He worked in back doors. Trump just, looks like a bigger idiot because he can't keep his mouth shut. But they both are pushing for the same thing. They want to censor their foes. The people that the people that they want to be the enemy. We have been so radicalized over the years that what are we supposed to do? How do we vote for a party? I mean, because, we talk about the left and the right, but how many parties are those really? I mean, I hear, that, well, a leftist isn't the same thing as a liberal, and a liberal isn't the same thing as this. And I'm like, I didn't even know that there was difference. If you're on the left, you're on the left. Oh, well, there's progressive liberals, there's this, just like there's, progressive conservatives, as oxymoronic as that sounds. Here's the thing I learned a long time ago. Pay attention to who the corporations favor. If the corporations are favoring one, politician over another, guaranteed that is not the politician you want. Which tells me, since everybody's siding with Trump, you don't want him. But remember, everybody was, all the corporations were siding with Obama. Huh. Funny, we didn't want him either. Not that you realized it until much later. But I mean, this is a guy that paid off basically everybody's debt with a stroke of a pen, feeding money to banks. And this was his first real act in office, was to pay the debt of a bunch of companies. When if he had just put that money at the bottom into the consumers, they would have paid off the debt themselves. And even though those banks got paid, they didn't wipe your debt. You still had it. So they got paid twice for your debt. Why do you think we have so much bigger banks now? Why do you think we're in so much trouble now, financially speaking? Why do you think the gap between the poor and the rich got so much bigger? That started all the way back in 2008. But people forget there was also a crisis in 2001. And I'm not just talking about a couple of airplanes. There was literally a financial crisis prior to that. Massive amounts of money were gone missing. And they were trying to find it. And then, big crisis happened. Everybody forgot about it. Well, they kicked the can down the road 7 years later, and that all came about. All those predatory loans that they were starting to realize were going to be a problem, all of a sudden hit. Just like this AI bubble. People don't realize it. People are freaking out. It's like, no, the bubble's going to burst. If the companies let it burst. It depends on how much they have invested in it. But to a lot of these companies, this bubble's going to hurt. If they don't let it burst, it's going to hurt because they're going to have to prop it up. If it does burst, it means they've lost all their propping up, because they're propping up AI and this bubble with fake money they're using to pay for the bubble. Like, it's literally a hand, basically your left hand is handing money to your right hand. Your right hand goes around the back. Your left hand is grabbing the money to pay your right hand in front. It's just this circle around yourself, because that's what they're doing. OpenAI is making promises that it doesn't really have any money. I mean, it's still losing money. It's not a profitable company. Yet they're signing deals that are $100 million, $200 million here. With Oracle, who's saying, oh yeah, we'll build these things. But Oracle's not a company that builds things. Yeah. The only problem is that companies trade on debt. The bigger the debt, the more money they can borrow, because it looks like they have more collateral. But if you tried to call in a company's debts, pick a company, it doesn't matter, they'd fail the next day. They just declare bankruptcy, reorganize, and move on. People don't realize how hard it is for a company to fail through bankruptcy. I mean, even the actual Kmart, they're still around. They're just not what you think they are. They have different names. And it seems hopeless, and I hope you guys realize that it is not. That it is not hopeless. Because all of this stuff is going to happen in your guys' lifetimes. That there is going to be a massive change. And if you get in now and pay attention, you can actually affect a difference in that change. You can make that change better. If you pay attention, if you insulate yourself from the change as much as possible. Buying real goods, not digital goods. Buying physical copies of your media, buying books, buying the things that matter to you, so that you can revisit those in times that are coming, that are going to be very, very harsh, very hard. And a lot of these companies that you see around you today that have always been there won't be. I mean, I don't think a lot of people really understand that Amazon is probably poised to fall within the next 10 years. It may not be there. A lot of these companies you think of as being, just always there. It's like, I can tell you a little secret. I know a time when Amazon wasn't there. They don't have the stick with it. They haven't stood the test of time. That's what I'm saying. We don't know how good they really are. Yeah, they put their fingers in so many different pies, but that doesn't mean they're going to stick around. And that goes for any of these companies. Microsoft has stood the test of time longer than Amazon. Microsoft is one you can bet on. I remember a time when Google didn't exist. Like, literally, the company wasn't even thought of. I remember when Yahoo was the biggest name in tech. Where are they now? I mean, they're a name out there, but they have far, far, far fallen. And I think a lot of people forget that. I mean, shoot, Sears and Roebuck Company. They used to have the tallest building. They were a company that stood the test of time. They can't, you can't, balance us out. And the fact is that Amazon just did exactly what Sears and Roebuck did, only with tech. Because Sears and Roebuck had the catalogs. All they had to do was transition to an online space, and they would have been fine. But they couldn't adapt with the times. So they failed. And that's where a lot of these algorithms, these prophets of profit, are going to screw everybody. because they won't be able to adapt to changing market factors. They'll be trying to control what people watch, people buy, people do, and people being people will rebel. Yeah, see, there you go. Yeah, because Yahoo can't afford to keep your history. You know, they can't afford to maintain an open account forever. They used to be industry titans. They used to be the name in the internet. And Google quietly took everything from them. I mean, I remember that it was a CEO so tone deaf that she canceled the indoor daycare for the employees that the employees were actually paying for the daycare. So it's not like it wasn't making money, but canceled the daycare, but also kicked the person out of the office next to her so she could have her kid at work so she could have daycare. Yet at the same time canceled it for everyone else. But her having the daycare was perfectly fine. And I mean, that set back, female CEOs by about 5 years, because she was one of the first high-tech female CEOs in tech. And that was like 10, 12 years ago. At least that's the story I remember reading, I think through Reuters. But again, don't quote me on it. I mean, I could be remembering wrong, but I know that the story itself was that she had an office next to her that was a daycare for her child. And this is at the same time that she kicked out the daycare to make for more offices so they could hire more employees, and took away the employee daycare. It really set back, just the public relations, just how things went at that time. It hurt everyone. But the ad is about to come up, so I will be back in 5 minutes. Oh yeah, taking away employee daycare is heinous. Especially since that was the reason why most of those people worked there. Also, keep in mind, it was always, just a couple more years before most of those employees were supposed to be able to telecommute. People forget that telecommuting or work from home was mandated in Clinton's time. You had to have a certain amount of your staff being able to work from home, or telecommute as it was called back then. I think it was like 25, 30%. And we've never gotten there. They keep pushing it back. They keep, doing away with it. I mean, if COVID taught us anything, it was entirely possible. That the dystopia is actually failing. And I know it's hard for people to understand, but it really is. The dystopia is failing. And I think that's what we see right now, is how all this is so difficult. Because I think a lot of companies are, well, the good times aren't rolling anymore. They're losing it. You can see it in just their actions. I mean, yeah, they seem very controlling and dystopian. I mean, even Trump's presidency shows that people are losing their grip. If you have to, as a company, lean on a politician to get things done, it means that people don't want your stuff. Sorry to say, but maybe you should just bow out and walk away. Cash out your stocks. Quit holding on to the reins of power that you just can't seem to manage. Most of the CEOs are probably older than have any right to be. Retire. Relax. It's okay. Let it go. Let the younger people take over. We don't know what they want. How could we? We're not them. And I think that's what a lot of people forget, is that they're so busy trying to control everything that they forget that it's down to what the people want. They'll get what they want. Yeah, let the world move on. And that's kind of the problem. That's why we're so stagnant for the last 20 years. Is because, people that are 50, 60, 70 years old aren't letting go to the reins of power. Whether that's in companies, whether that's in movies, whether that's in politics. They're all so old, they don't even get people anymore. That's why indie video games are going mad. That's why, Blumhouse exploded. A24 exploded because they were headed up by younger people that had fresh ideas. Sure, they made some mistakes along the way. Probably still are going to make some mistakes along the way. But that's part of it. That's part of what goes on. And that's okay. So it's not all doom and gloom. It just looks that way. It looks scary right now. But the truth is that it's not. This is actually just the birthing pains of, I hate to say it, but a new world order. A new way of doing things. You're seeing it all across the world. People fighting for new ideas. Take what happened in Nepal and how they elected their government through Discord. The kids rebelled. And by kids, people under 30. They wanted a new world. And they weren't getting it. Yeah, there was a lot of other factors, but the simple fact is that they wanted a world where they felt that they could do something. Yeah, the grown-ass kids. And the only reason why I call them kids is because that's what they call them. That's what all of these politicians that are 70 years old are going to think a 30-year-old is a kid that doesn't know any better. Simple fact is that they do. They know what they want. And if they don't, yeah, sure, they're going to make some mistakes. I'm sorry, that's life. People make mistakes. It happens. Even worse is that, yeah, people will die because mistakes happen. Wars might get started is what I mean, not actual political violence. That's wrong. I will never advocate for violence at all. The only time I will ever advocate for violence is in defense of yourself or another. But you can't preemptively take someone or start a war. Well, yeah, exactly. You're 18 years old. You're an adult. People should actually treat you as such. Once you're over 18, you're an adult. But your brain's not fully formed until 25. Gee, I wonder why your brain might not be forming until you're 25. I think that might have more to do with the fact that you're not letting it form. It has nothing to do with actual biological or natural processes. It has everything to do with you taking consequence away from them, which means, yeah, they might have to go to jail. They might have to serve time for the mistakes they make. Oh, yeah. Well, and that's really kind of where we are, is that, these old people are trying to live vicariously through the younger and trying to guide them in ways that they don't even understand. Look at how terrible the movies have been lately. I remember growing up and movies coming out, a lot slower. You might have 2 or 3 movies that you'd want to see a year. Summer was always blockbuster time. And then you might have some damn good holiday or family movies coming out during Thanksgiving time, around Thanksgiving to Christmas. Oh, yeah. See, that's the difference is that respect your elders is bullshit if your elders aren't respecting you. Flat out. If they're not willing to teach or treat you like an adult, if they're going to treat you like a child, then you have every right to thumb your nose at them and walk away. Well, yeah, of course they want to change the retirement age to 70. That way they can keep borrowing from the Social Security that they've promised everybody forever. Instead of just, taxing people appropriately and leaving the Social Security where it belongs. Me personally, I think everybody, who's born, the government should put basically a bond in their name against their Social Security, so it's matured over, when you're born, 70 years, a bond matures over 70 years. Guess what? That's your Social Security. And if you're going to, say you tax off whatever, you didn't make that for the balance of that wage. You want to talk about rolling in the dough. That's a way the government can do it. If you don't make whatever, for Social Security, boom, who cares? The government's going to make the money back through that bond. It would also have a really good way of controlling inflation because bonds actually tie up cash. Oh, yeah, federally protected retirement. Well, not just the job, which is just over broke, but, various vagaries of, honestly, I think Social Security, you should just get socialized everything. Healthcare, food, once you reach a certain age, you shouldn't have to worry. You should just have a card from the government that just, basically pays for your basics. Housing, groceries, even a little entertainment. You should have a certain stipend that you can use per month. And that's it. And I get so tired of governments interfering with people, saying, you can't have universal health care, even though the very people that are telling you can't have universal health care themselves have universal health care. Congress, senators, representatives, they get universal health care. Right. I totally agree. I don't want 70-year-olds needing to work for their living or worry about where, their next meal is coming from, or if they can make their, rent payment or house payment or whatnot, or if they're going to be able to get groceries. I'm willing to pay extra in taxes for that. See, that's the thing is, everybody's going to have to pay for it. They're just going to have it for free. It's like, yeah, so. Yeah. Yeah. Or people with disability, like lifelong disabilities, having to scrimp and save, but can't go over a certain amount per month or else they lose their disability. What kind of ridiculousness is that? Especially since it's so messed up. Well, that's even more messed up. A shitty broken marriage? Yeah, that's even more messed up. But that's not, I get it. The world is a messed up place. It always has been. It always will be. Because people in power, and it's not a conspiracy. Everybody's like, oh, it's a conspiracy. No, it's people short-sightedly taking advantage of certain situations. They're not geniuses. They're stupid. All they see is them. They're stupid narcissists that all they're trying to do is get their bag, and all they see is about 5 years ahead. Because that's all they care about is the next 5 years. They don't pay attention to what's going to happen. They don't pay attention to, oh, why don't my kids have anything? Because you didn't leave them anything. I can't take my hands off the reins of power. Look what the state of the world's in. You're the one that put it there. Get your hands off the reins of power because you don't know what you're doing. Let go. You've outlived your usefulness, and it's okay. Being old, you have some wisdom, but you damn sure shouldn't be trying to control a fast-paced world like we are in today. Trying to keep up with that, you know, even the younger presidents. I mean, Obama was probably the youngest looking president we had in a long time. And by the end of it, he was gray. He looked old. You know, politics isn't easy. You know, I mean, I get that there's a whole lot. I mean, a lot of these people are beholden to seeing, you know, behind the scenes stuff. Oh, people should not have to validate their existence other than they woke up in the morning. Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus. Yeah, there you go. I have no idea who you're talking about. Quintius Cincinnatus. Which tells you just how far down that was. And actually, a politician just recently gave up power. And that was the prime minister of Japan because the people asked him to. There was enough call out and shout out for him to step down that they did. That he actually, hey, if the people don't like it, he stepped down willingly. I think we need more people in power like that. That if enough people are calling, you know, saying you're not doing the job right. You know, and that should be for, you know, not just politicians, but for corporations too. Because there gets to be a point where you just, you don't understand what you're doing anymore. Oh, well, see, there you go. And I take it where he went to harvest his crops was Cincinnati? No, I'm joking. I'm joking. I was pretty sure that was Roman, but I wish people in power would understand that they are not the only ones in the world that can handle what they're doing. Yeah, sure, people aren't going to do it the way you want them to, but that doesn't mean that they can't do it. That doesn't mean that they can't be done that way. You know, it's one of the worst things in the world is when you ask somebody, well, why do you do that way? Well, it's the way we've always done it. Which that tells me you have never put any thought into what you are doing. You do it because of tradition, not because it's smart, not because it's the right way to do things. Well, what's funny is, Ghoulie, Garden and Craft, do you realize how much money you could make for your local community just by doing that? And I don't mean money. I mean, like, actually how much that could benefit your local community. Because 9 times out of 10, a backyard garden, you make more than you can use. Let alone, you know, having a time to craft, you make stuff for others. You know, I mean, if you just craft all your day, you're going to have so much that you can't do anything else but give it away. And if everybody does this, guess what? Suddenly there's an abundance in your local neighborhood of stuff. That's how that works. You know, and somehow we have lost sight of how beneficial it is to let people do what they want to do. You know, all you're doing when you make people strive for every little thing is you lose. Yeah. Or whatever. I mean, I knew a lady that used to make these, it started, Granny. I knew a lady when I lived in Northern Nevada that would crochet these really tight knit, like sleeves that would go over casts. And it was made with waterproof fiber. So it actually looked cool and it protected the cast in the foot. But it still let it breathe. It was actually really cool. I mean, well, I shouldn't say waterproof, but water resistant. It was made from, water resistant, threads. And it worked really well. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. And it was a pretty cool thing to have. Yeah, exactly. I mean, these are things that people want to do, but we live in the real world and, you have to have that job and you have to do this and you can't, we forget, people say necessity is the mother of invention, and I call bullshit. The mother of invention is simply time. That's it. The mother of invention is ease of life. You invent things to make things easy. Or easier than you have it. Greatest inventions we've ever had weren't done out of necessity. They were done because people had the time and money and didn't have to worry about their life. They just made things. One of the greatest inventions, Alexander Graham Bell, made the phone. How did he do so? Because he was already rich. Well, again, accidents like penicillin, yeah. Computers. Oh, well, that was because of wartime. It's like, no, it's because the inventors of the computer had a problem to solve, not necessity. They had a problem to solve, and the government paid them to solve it. They had the time and willingness to put their brains towards solving this problem. They didn't have to worry about where they were going to sleep. They didn't have to worry about their food. They didn't have to worry about paying their bills and getting, you're not going to ask, friggin' Turing to go and get a second job. Oh. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we forget that most of our inventions, I mean, Newton, Einstein, they worked for colleges. They got paid to do what they do anyway, what they do naturally. Wait, people will actually be happy to do what they do naturally? I mean, Green Jeans, you like to cook. Imagine if you didn't have to pay rent or, pay your bills. Would you stop cooking? Like if you took all the stress out of your daily living, making sure that you could make your ends meet, would you still go to work and cook? Would you still go do your job? That's an honest question. I am honestly curious. Because I know several jobs that I had that I would honestly, if I didn't have to worry about anything, I'd still go into work. I mean, if security was like it was 20 some odd years ago, I'd go back in a heartbeat. You would mostly No, I'm not saying you got fired. I'm saying you don't have to worry about anything. All your needs are met. Okay, maybe yours is a bad example because where you work. What I mean is that you like to cook. Would you still cook? I mean, would you still work in a kitchen and cook for other people because you enjoy it? Does that make more sense? I mean, we all have talents and things we want to do. Yeah, well, okay, yeah. See, there you go. A LARP B&B. Why not? Buy an old Victorian mansion and chronically, do horror themed on Halloween and, gussy it up for, the Pride and Prejudice crowd. Only they have to role play, actually trying to get the attention of their paramour. Stupid stuff like that. Have fun with it. A murder mystery dinner theater weekend. Every night you got to try and figure out, who killed who. I think that would be hella fun. Cowboy fantasy LARP B&B? Why not? I mean, why not? I mean, there's all sorts of choices. Yeah, yeehaw, exactly. And that's all I'm saying is that people would still want to do what they love to do. People would still want to work. I don't care what these people try to tell you. It's like, oh, there's going to be people that don't work. And we need consumers of our products. Hey, cool. You just finished your assignment. Congrats. Ha, ha, ha. Well, they obviously didn't know me very well. Yes, Mark. Mark accidentally killed Mark. That is exactly. So I got the rat poison and the coffee bean bags mixed up. I'm sorry. Although actually lately I've been using up some of the wife, like she didn't really particularly like it, but she had these cacao beans. So I mix those with my coffee beans and, mix it up, and that's actually really good. Okay. By I mean my wife makes coffee in the morning. So my brother actually used to deliver water to this place. And the water company he worked for had caffeinated water. And this place would make their coffee with the caffeinated water. Well, of course it would. Hey, I've cut down. I only drink 1 pot of coffee a day now. It's no longer 2. And I drink probably another half gallon to a gallon of water a day. I'm at least, it basically coffee to water ratio is about 50-50. And with mixing the beans with cacao, I'm actually reducing even further. So I've been getting better. I'm making smarter choices, or at least trying. And I hate that concept of when people talk about socialism and how, it's like, oh, I just be paying for other people to sit on their ass and not do anything. It's like, no, because you need consumers of the thing. That's what a lot of people don't understand is like even the people who don't do anything would still need to buy stuff to consume. They would still need to have critics and say, oh, this stuff's good. That one's, not so good. For certain people, for other people, who cares? The problem is why does it matter to you? Are you doing what you love? Then why does it matter to you if another person, what they love is to just consume media? Somebody's going to need to go to Green Jeans LARP. Somebody's going to need to buy Ghouligan's crafting stuff. That Ghoulie makes. Well, why not? I mean, as long as people aren't taking advantage of it. See, and that's the delicate balance is also people have to remember that people will take advantage. Humans are still humans. But the simple fact is that as long as they're performing a function, and part of the function is actually consuming an item. If you're going to have so many people making, somebody's got to consume it. It's got to go somewhere. And I think that's what all of these communism and all of these things forgot. Is that you don't always have to have everybody working at the same time either. rotate them in and out. Every 3 months, rotate people in and out. Give them a chance to go try a different job. They don't always have to be the best at it. As long as they're not destroying things, who cares? Exactly. And that's what I mean. Rotate people out like every 3 months. 3 months on, 3 months off, or 1 month off, and then you switch over to a different job or a different sector. I think people forget that we are in burnout mode all the time. All the time. Well, that is the point of life, is just to experience things. I mean, hell, I would love to shadow a lawyer and learn what they do in a day. I would absolutely be fascinated by learning and how that's done. And I don't mean the forward-facing, BS PR stuff that lawyers like to do. I'm talking about their actual job. What do they actually do? How much research? How much are they writing out their, opening statements? How much of the effort are they looking into all of that stuff? Depositions was the word I was looking for. Same thing with pretty much any other job. I would love to learn. I'd love to shadow Green Jeans in the kitchen and learn how to cook properly, or at least cook his way. Right? Oh yeah, I forgot about that, Gossip. Yeah, you're the one doing lawyery stuff. And right, I mean, I'm sure it's very interesting. And that's the thing is hell, I wouldn't even mind going out the fields and, working agriculture work for a while. Picking berries or doing this. It probably wouldn't be that, something that would be high on my list. But if I don't have to worry about making ends meet, I'm not worrying how much the money the job pays. I just want to see what I'm actually good at. And in our day and age, we don't let people do that. I mean, you're told to make a decision in high school for the rest of your life, which, Morgan Freeman didn't get a starring role until he was in his 50s. Think about that for a second. Yeah, he was in movies here and there. He went to the Air Force. He did things. But the thing that he's going to be known for is his voice. Is for acting roles. And he didn't get a starring role until his 50s. People don't have to pick right away what they're going to do in their life. It is never, ever too late to stop and reassess your situation. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with, you'll never grow up. Some of the best toy designers never grew up. Some of the best comic book artists never grew up. I mean, can you tell me Stan Lee truly grew up? You ever see an interview with that guy? He was always having fun, except for, maybe the last few years of his life when people were exploiting him. Thanks, Disney. But I just think a lot of people don't understand. We talk about, get a job, but, work on your passion at home, monetize your hobbies and do that. See, I get it. I'm lucky. I get to do what I really love to do, and that's talk to people. Play video games, talk to people, goof off, learn things. Yeah, and Ghoulie, who did you learn that from? Just saying. Who did you learn that from? And I think a lot of people need to realize that there's always time, right? Being curious. And we punish that as people get older. We punish curiosity. Right. It is so hard to be creative when you use all of your energy in just feeding yourself, keeping a roof over your head. You use so much energy that it's so hard to be good at your job. Like, that's something I think a lot of people forget. That I think psychologically, humanity is getting to the point of actually being able to do communism or socialism properly, to work for the community. You know, and I think we needed to realize that there has to be checks and balances when you're doing a socialism, when you're doing a communism government. There has to be checks and balances. Right? Well, yeah, we work hard. Yeah, it does. I mean, we work hard. And I mean, my dad would constantly complain at me because I was trying to use my head. Because I was trying to use my head to work, and like, oh, you just get yourself a job. Like, anything using your head wasn't a job to him. He had no respect for using your head. You got to use your body, actual work. Says the guy that most of his jobs, he let the machine do the work for him. He was a heavy equipment operator or a truck driver, depending on what time in his life. It's not hard work. That's physically demanding work because you have to sit there. You have to move the levers, do this. How is that any different than me working on a computer? How is that any different than me doing typing or anything else like that? Or being a security guard? I mean, it's learning that, yes, his job was hard. It required a whole lot of hand-eye coordination. It required, there was no better driver that I trusted in all my years. And I don't particularly like my dad. Well, I didn't. And yeah, he judged me for playing games and joysticks and observation, but he also sat there with joysticks, levers, and observations. Yeah, I know. Why do you think I was so good at video games? Because, it probably was passed down. Just be honest there. And that's part of it is that people don't get it. People really don't get it. They don't understand how everybody's job, everybody does things. And if you pay attention, if you keep that curious mind, if you keep wanting to learn, if you keep wanting to see what others are doing, not judge them for what they're doing, but pay attention to what they're doing and see the passion in their work. And if you don't see passion in their work, it's pretty sad. Because that's one thing my dad always did have, was a passion for his work. He was always lauded as one of the best workers they had, which is why he never moved up. He was too good at his job. They couldn't lose him because they'd lose production. Half the time, the companies he worked for would have to hire two people if they, put him in a higher position to make up for the loss of him in the base position. I can respect my dad and his ability to do that. But I had no respect for his inability to see that there were other ways to do things. You don't have to do things my way. You just have to get it done. That's all that matters. Do what you say you're going to do. If you need help, I can show you the way I would do it. And if I see you do something in an inefficient way, of course I'm going to tell you. It's like, oh, I don't do it that way. I do it this way. And this is the reason why. And that's what I've always tried to do. I've always tried to explain why I do things the way I do. Because I think it's important to pass on knowledge. But not only pass on knowledge, but so that people can understand where I'm coming from. My point of view. Maybe they'll see something I'm wrong. It's like, oh, it should be done this way because of this. Oh, I didn't see it that way. I don't always admit when I'm wrong, but I do try when I see it, when it's pointed out to me. When I realize I'm wrong, I do try to make up for that mistake. Right? The only stupid question is a silenced one. The only stupid question in my book is when you give me a dumb look. Because obviously you don't have understanding. Oh, yeah. I mean, my pet peeve is ignorance. If you don't know something, ask. If you don't understand why I'm doing something, ask. It's simple as that. I'll tell you. I might even spend, 2, 3, 4 hours telling you why I do a certain thing and completely forgot that we were supposed to be doing something else. Right, Ghoulie? I think sometimes you kids would ask questions just to get me to talk, and then, we wouldn't be doing what we were supposed to be doing. Manipulate my love of speechifying. And I wouldn't put it past you. In other words, I wouldn't blame you. I mean, I've always been a very curious person. I always like learning new things. No, not very often. I always love finding out things, doing new things. And I may not actually like the thing itself, but that's the thing I can go, okay, no, don't like that. Moving on. And I think people need to have more of, I almost said willingness, but I think they need the freedom to do that. I think people need a freedom to try something. I also think that's why a lot of these CEOs and corporate bigwigs and politicians is they chose this so early in life that they don't really understand that there's more out there. Right. Yeah, I know. I'm being a butthead. And I mean, if somebody knows what they want to do and they do it, that's fine. That's great. I will never, disparage somebody because they're doing what they want to do. And just because I ask questions doesn't mean I don't want you to do it. It's probably because I want to know why you're doing it the way you're doing it or how that works or whatnot. And I noticed. I just wish more people would really understand what it means to have a joy in life, a passion that you want to do, beyond any means of monetary recompensance. We shouldn't have to do things just to do them. We should do things because we want to, because it's fun. That's my thing is that I think that there is more to life than grabbing shit tickets. And to explain that one is that you work a job to get paid to eat food and to buy toilet paper. Because, you crap out what you just ate. So basically, you work a job to buy toilet paper because you're crapping out what you just ate. Shit tickets. It's an oversimplification of an old joke. And that's the thing is that we just keep doing things because we're told that's what we need to do. And for some stupid reason, that's always what I've kind of railed against is, well, why do we always do these things? Why must it be done this way? Why must we function this way? And sometimes there's valid, good reasons. Absolutely. Okay, that's why. Other times it's because we've always done it this way. But did you ever think to ask why? Did you ever think to ask, is there a different way to do it that might be better? Or that just that might be just as valid? That it's okay to do something one way because it's not really doing it any different way. But we have this whole idea of controlling. You know, it's like, well, I'm the one teaching you, so I need to control the way it's done. Why? Why is your way so much better? Explain it to me. Because anybody that's ever been in any kind of school is if a teacher cannot properly explain the curriculum, they don't understand the curriculum, they're teaching from a book. And that is one of my biggest pet peeves. If a teacher's walking around with their book all the time, it means they do not know the curriculum. Or a boss walking around with a checklist of what needs to get done, because that means they don't really know what needs to get done. You know, they've done it a certain way for so long. Well, yeah, me with algebra too. I mean, that's perfectly valid. I'm not going to try and teach somebody algebra, though. That's why most coaches teach history. Yeah, it doesn't change. Except for now that we're actually questioning it, it kind of does. History does kind of change. Because a lot of what we were told is wrong. And yeah, because that means your algebra teacher didn't know algebra. They knew how they were told to do it, but they couldn't tell you how to do it. And that's one of the things that, you know, means a lot to me. But here's a conundrum for you. Speaking of history, I find this one, you know, little segue here. So somebody brought to my attention that primary sources can be wrong. And if you understand primary sources, a primary source would be a person who wrote about a thing. Well, okay. See, I'll get back to my story in a second. So you still don't know if it was a failure of his understanding or a failure of his ability to explain things in a way you specifically understood. Here's the thing. If you know something, you can explain it in multiple different ways, not just one way. If you only know it because that's the way you were told, like you don't actually understand a thing. It's like understanding that fractions are percentages. Like a fraction is a percentage problem, but it's also a division problem. Like understanding that a fraction is all of these things at once, other than just being told, oh, 1/2 is also equal to 50%. Well, 1/2, you know, that's a division problem. You know, how many times does 2 go into 1? Well, 2 doesn't go into 1. So you have to put a little decimal, add a 0 behind it. 2 goes into 10 5 times. But it's 0.5, so 50%. Right. If you understand an apple, not only can you explain it from the other side, you can cut it in half and still explain it as being an apple. You can skin the skin off of it and still recognize it as an apple. You can cut it into a little cube, taste it, and go, that's an apple. If you truly understand an apple, you can understand it from all of those little parts and explain each of those parts. You know, we recognize an apple core as still being part of an apple. If we understand an apple, we can recognize an apple from its seed or just from the stem. That's what I mean by truly understanding something. But school ain't got time for that, except for when they do, because they actually add a whole bunch of stuff that you don't really need to know for some stupid reason. And I mean, that's what I mean when it's about understanding something. It's 1/2 is 50%. Is the division problem 2 goes into 1 how many times? It's also a decimal, 0.5. A fraction is all of these things. I think I was almost 26 before I really understood that, versus just what I was being told. But that fraction 1/2 represents 0.5, what represents 50%, represents a division problem. Like it is representative of all of these things. Versus just doing, just going with it because I was told that. And I don't know if anybody can relate to what I'm describing about suddenly understanding all of it. That not only is fraction part of a whole, but it's a representative of a whole lot more and can be translated very differently. And each fraction problem works the same way. Yeah. It doesn't matter how you write it, it's still the exact same thing. And I think that's why a lot of people, when, offered a 1/4 pound burger or a 1/3 pound burger, what are you going to go for? If you're really hungry, which burger are you going to go for? A 1/3 pound or a 1/4 pound? Answer in chat. Or don't, I guess. Either that or else lag's just taking forever. Sorry, the delay. Yeah, a 1/3. Why? Well, because a 1/3's bigger than a 1/4. What's bigger, a 1/3 or a 1/4? If you want a 1/4 pound burger or a 1/3 pound burger? When offered this option, most people take a 1/4 pound because a 1/4 is bigger than a 1/3. But they're wrong. Right. But it's funny how many times people always go for the 1/4 pounder when a 1/3 pounder is bigger. And it's sad. Do you want 30% of a burger, or you want 0.3 of a burger, or 0.4? Sorry, not 0.4, 0.25. Sorry, 0.33 of a burger and 0.25. Even funnier is when you ask people, do you want 1/1000th or 1/100th? Well, I want 1/1000th. All right. And that's what I mean is just that people forget to really think things through because we teach them wrong. That's what suddenly when I was like 25 in a college level math class and went, I'm an idiot. I suddenly understand this stuff. It took one good math teacher to teach me it. And that's what I mean, that school doesn't teach very well. It tries, but it goes about it all the wrong way. I mean, I've seen some of these freaking failures of teachers. Right? Because it really is. It's about 10 times smaller. Sorry, not about. It is 10 times smaller. 1/1000th is 10 times smaller than 1/100th. I don't know. It's really hard to describe that there is so many things that schools don't teach. You know, I mean, the important things like, you know, how do I pay my taxes? How do I invest money properly? You know, how do I take care of budgeting for my house? How do I do these things? Why aren't we taught these things? Why are these things that are just not touched? You know, and I think it's a big gap. People forget that that's not taught anymore in school. And budgeting shouldn't be so esoteric, so difficult. You know, and why do people get upset when you talk money? Like at your job, like why is it so wrong of you to ask your coworker, so how much you getting paid for the same job I'm doing? Well, because they want to use it as leverage against you. No, of course they do. Yeah, but when you haven't taught the parents that, how are the parents supposed to pass it down? You know, why is a practical math course not part of your freshman year in high school? Oh, we taught you money math back in, you know, elementary school. Yeah, Darla, I wasn't thinking about bills back then. Oh my God. I don't know who Darla is, but you know, suddenly that's the person that, you know, I'm arguing with. I like no, you weren't thinking bills back then. You just wanted, you know, now you know what a quarter, 50 cent, nickel, dime. But that doesn't teach you how to take care of your bills. Darla sounds like a handful. Yeah. I just like they don't really understand how right. Stupid Darla. How difficult it is to when you leave your home, you know, and your family behind, you know, suddenly you have live on your own and you have to take care of your own bills and pay everything. And it's just like, oh, don't even get me started on that. See, I am a firm believer, as you know, I was studying to be, you know, I wanted to teach English at the college level. There are two branches of English, and people don't give it either one the respect it deserves. There is business English or the science of English, you know, where everything you write is very important. It has a place, it does this, it does that. And then there's creative writing, what is the art of the English language. Where, yeah, I might use punctuation weirdly because I want that to be there, because I want it to be art. You know, I want you to stop awkwardly. I want you to do these things because it's supposed to be part of what's happening. Call them Darla. Yeah, there you go. Stupid Darla. Right. Well, and there is a certain science to the English language, you know, like, oh, don't let your participle dangle. How many people actually even understand that? That's Gouligan's laugh. But that's a Lamau, basically. I think Green Jeans didn't understand what you meant by the question mark. What are we questioning me about? Why am I being questioned? What is this interrogation? Oh wait, I already answered the question, so whatever. I'm feeling left out now. There, I did it too. You know what? I'm the boss. I can do this. Yeah. I don't know. It's just, I think we need to understand. Okay. Well, yeah, I forget that you should know. A lot of people that gets transposed. Oh, really? What? Okay. Yeah. I guess it's about that time. I just realized got about 10 minutes. I was confused by someone else's confusion. Yes, I've been there. Yeah. I really wish, how do I put this? If we taught people to communicate more exactly, more effectively, I think the world would be a better place. I think that would reduce racism, the class war. I think it would reduce politics wars, all of these different, things that if people just communicated effectively. It's like the whole trans argument between Republicans and Democrats. It's not about the people being trans that the Republicans are fighting against. It's at the feel of loss of place. That they lost their place in the world because they're not sure where or how this person fits in. They feel like because they don't understand a thing, that person is wrong. No, I don't understand why a trans person is trans. Only they can. It's part of who they are. That's all that matters. I don't need to understand them. That's the part, is just understanding. And being able to communicate effectively is like, no, I don't want to take your place from you. I just want a part in your place. But we think that because I have to make allowances for this person, that's taking something away from me and not adding to your community a different perspective, a different way of seeing things that you may not have had. Like I said, I don't have to agree with them, but I'm not them. It's not my place to tell them who they are. I think there should be guardrails on it depending on age, but that's about it. That's all I can say about that one. Just like I think the left is really worried about, how Trump's doing these things and that things. Ooh, that sounds like fun. Can we have magic cranes that are infested with werewolves and being fought by mystic samurais? Because that sounds like a fun campaign to me. Like, Magic on the Disoriented Express. Instead of Murder on the Orient Express. Oh, come on. You could meld it all. You're creative enough, Green Jeans. I like Magic on the Disoriented Express. And you know what? I am probably going to do something like that at some point now. Because that sounds like fun. Sorry. I know. Hey, congratulations. As you should. With everything they're doing, as you should. Speaking of companies that just need to, that the people in charge need to step away because they obviously have no understanding of their audience. The problem is you can't make an artwork like D&D based on profit. You have to let them make the story and then figure out how to make profit off of it. Well, and that's the problem is that when you shackle the creative person to solely worrying about profit, you come up with garbage. That's what you have the other side of the business people for, is to learn how to make profit off of said thing. You know what's funny about that, Green Jeans? I keep telling you about Savage Worlds. You could do each one of those in Savage Worlds or blend them all without leaving anything really behind. Because War of the Apocalypse 5th edition, I don't have any faith in. Legend of the Five Rings, awesome. And yeah, steampunk. Steampunk. Is that like a weird cyberpunk monk? Sorry, steampunk monk? Steampunk? Yes, I know. I'm sorry. I should quit teasing you. But yeah, you know, I mean, it's just when you shackle creatives to worry about money. Yeah, there you go. You're going to lose a good product. It's up to the other side to figure out how to make profit off of it. Do you think that the people that paid Da Vinci to paint and invent and just be Da Vinci really worried about how to make money off of him? No, they knew if they gave him enough time, he'd come up with something. And I guarantee you that he paid them 10 times over. You know, patronage used to be something, and now Patreon likes to steal basically everything from. That's why I don't use Patreon. It's like, I refuse. You know, they're not a good company. They take so much from the creator that you're just really not getting anything back. Or if you are, you have to have such a large audience to do so. And so I'm going to leave with those words. The simple fact is that don't shackle your creatives, because you will end up with an inferior product. Let your creatives do their job. Your job is to figure out how to make it pay. Oh no, Leonardo da Vinci had a patron. He was a kept man. I'm serious, look him up. I can't remember which one, but basically he had, I mean, sure, there were certain times like, oh, hey, I'm holding a party. Can you have something to show? I mean, and that's where we got the animatronic lion from. You know, that's where a lot of his paintings came from. You know, I mean, there were certain strictures. He had to, you know, perform certain things, but outside of that, you know, it wasn't really about, you know, feeding him a certain thing that he had to come up with. But anyway, don't shackle your creatives. You'll get an inferior product.